The first objective of this video is to see how to publish a process in the portal to share the process documentation with all users who have access rights to it in the process portal. The second objective is to know how to improve a process, in particular with the versions to continue the improvement cycle of a process. We will click on the Actions tab to see how we can publish the documentation of this process in the portal. We saw in the previous video how to download the image and the documentation of a process. We are now going to see how to publish the documentation of a process and make it available on the portal for all users having the rights to access this documentation. To do this, we must click on Publish Documentation. There are then two options. You can publish process documentation to the portal without notifying any user. If you choose this option, the process will then be published in the portal without any user in your environment being notified by email. There is an exception if you have designated a process owner. Indeed, it will be automatically notified by email and by notification so that he can validate the publication of the documentation of this process. You also have the option of publishing process documentation and notifying a list of users via email. To do this, you need to click on this item. The first step is to list the participants and people who will be concerned by this email. The system includes the process owner in this list. If you have associated a participant definition with a lane, HEFLO will then list the different users associated with this definition. You will learn more about participants in the automation training. If you haven't associated a participant with a lane, you still have the option to manually add users from your environment. The second step consists in validating the list of users who will receive the email. If you have selected a participant definition, then you have the option to select only a few people who make up that definition. If you chose only users manually, then you can skip this step. For information, the selection of the owner of the process is automatic and mandatory. You cannot remove this user from the list. The last step is to write the email that will be sent. You must choose a subject for this email, and define its content according to the information you want to share with these users. Generally, we write here a message to warn of the publication of the process. We will see later in this video that we can release process updates. In this case, this feature can be used to present the various updates made to this process. In our case, we will simply publish the process documentation without informing the various users of our environment. So I'm going to leave this screen. Then I'm going to click again on Publish Documentation and choose the first option. From then on you have two options. There is no associated process owner. The process documentation is then published and available on the portal. Second possibility. There is an associated process owner, which is our case. We then have a message telling us that the documentation of the process is awaiting publication. Indeed, the user designated as process owner must first validate this publication request. While waiting for this validation, the documentation of this process will not be available in the portal. We will now go to the process portal. You must click on this icon to access it. By default, there are 4 options available in the portal. In this video, we will only study the documentation option. This is where you will find documentation for published processes. The Responsibilities option allows you to visualize the distribution of responsibilities in your different processes. This feature allows you to view your organization's RACI matrix. It is necessary to configure participant definitions in the lanes and different tasks to be able to use this functionality. The two options, New Request and My Requests, will be presented in the training of automation. We will click on Documentation. We are then redirected to the list of all published process documentation. This list is made up of the processes whose access is authorized to the logged-in user. We will see how to restrict access to processes in our last video. So you have the process name information. If a category is associated with a process, then you can see its icon and color. You can also see a preview of the associated textual documentation at the process level. You have the option of using the search feature to find documentation for a published process. This works like the search processes to edit feature. I will try to search for our process, purchase of material goods and services. I can't find my process. Why? The documentation for this process is not yet available on the portal, because the publication has not yet been validated by the process owner. In our case, the process owner is Mary Davies. We'll be logging in with Mary Davies' account to see how we can validate this publication. We will take a look at the configuration of HEFLO before talking about the validation of the publication. As you can see, there is a difference between the screens accessed by Mary Davies and Bill Evans. Indeed, these two people do not have the same user roles. Bill Evans has an administrator role, which allows him to have access to all the screens and processes in his environment, while Mary Davies has a portal-only role, so she only has access to the portal screen. We will see more about the roles in HEFLO in our last video. Mary Davies has received an email indicating that a process documentation publication is awaiting approval from her. In addition to this, Mary also received a notification telling her the same information. We can then click on View to be redirected directly to the element in question. If you have not clicked on this option, you can still find the documentation to be validated in the documentation portal. We will click on Documentation. We can see the different published processes. Unlike the Bill Evans portal, the Purchase of Material Goods and Services process appears. There is an icon with an exclamation mark associated with it. You can see this same symbol to the right of the search bar. The symbol on the search functionality means that a process is awaiting validation. This symbol is also present at the level of the process concerned. Only the process owner can see this information. We will click on this process. As you can see, we have a message to validate or not the documentation of this process. We have access to all process documentation. This allows the process owner to have the necessary information to validate or not this publication. If we decide not to validate the publication, then we must write a justification. This information will then be visible to the process analyst. This is to give him an indication to correct the process and its documentation. In our case, we are going to validate this publication, so we are going to click on Yes. Let's go back to the list of documented processes. As you can see, the red symbol with the exclamation mark has disappeared. This means that the process documentation is now published. We will verify this by logging into Bill Evans' account. We are now using Bill Evans' account. As you can see, the process is now available in this list. We return now to the account of Mary Davies. you can see additional information about the process. You have Mary Davies' profile picture associated with the process. Indeed, HEFLO displays on this list the profile picture or the avatar associated with the owner of the process concerned. As we mentioned earlier, we have the possibility of searching the documentation of a process thanks to keywords. The search system works the same way as for the process editor. The system will put at the top of the search results the processes whose title contains the words searched for, and below the processes which contain this or these words in their documentation. I can add additional words to narrow the search results. We can click on the process title or any related item to access the documentation for it. We now have access to the complete documentation of the process. You then have all the key information, such as the name of the process, the version. We will see the importance of versions later in this video. You can also see the publication date and the process owner. As we have seen in the process editor, you also have the possibility to download the documentation of this process in PDF or HTML format by clicking on this element. Then you have access to the textual documentation of the process. This is the documentation that we have associated at the process property level. You will also find the process map. HEFLO defines the dimensions of the cartography so that it is fully visible on your screen. You can adapt the dimensions of this one if you wish. You can also find attachments associated with the process and download them. Then you will find the documentation of each BPMN element of your diagram. This documentation is distributed by lane. We will take the example of the collect quotes task. This is the task where we have associated several pieces of documentation. As you can see, we can see the text with its formatting, as well as the table, the image, and the video. You can watch the video. For information, you will find the information of all the BPMN elements if they have an associated textual documentation. The information concerning the activities is always presented in the second part even if no textual documentation is associated. Other BPMN elements need to have associated textual documentation to be displayed in this part. This documentation is interactive. Indeed, if you want to know where the Approve the Request task is located in your diagram, you just have to click on the symbol representing this task. You will then be redirected to the task in the process map. It also works in reverse. Indeed, if you click on an element of your process diagram, you will then be redirected to the documentation on it. When modeling our process, we added a call activity regarding supplier registration. The objective of this activity is to use an already existing process. Our process mapping is also interactive on this point. If we click on this call activity, we are then redirected to the documentation of the linked process. I ask for your attention on this point. It is necessary to verify that the documentation of the version of the target process is indeed published. If it is not published, you will then be redirected to the process editor. This can be a problem for users who only have access to the process portal. Indeed, if the documentation of the target process is not available on the portal, then the user will have an error when he clicks on this call activity. At the top of this page containing the process documentation, you have the possibility to return to the previous level by clicking on the name of the parent process. We have the same level of interaction with subprocesses that have the inline option enabled. We will click on the subprocess. We can go back in the same way as we saw before. The process portal also allows you to write comments and suggestions for improvements. You will find this feature at the bottom of this page. You can comment on a specific task. We will take an example. Let's go back to the process diagram. I believe this part of the process could be improved. Indeed, it would be interesting to send a message to explain to the requester why his request is refused. I can then click on this task to be redirected to the associated documentation. There is an element, comments. If we click on it, we are then redirected to the comments section with the name of the task already entered. It is also possible to write a comment on the process in general. To do this, simply go directly to the comments section without having clicked on a task. We will write a comment to suggest an improvement on this part of the process. We then have to click on this icon to publish this comment. This comment is now visible on this documentation for the various users who have access to it. This is also visible in the process editor. The goal is to establish communication with process analysts to make improvements. We will now return to the account of Bill Evans. Bill Evans received an email and a notification regarding this comment as he is the process editor. The purpose is to notify the process editor that a question, improvement suggestion, or other request exists. This user can then find this comment directly in the process editor. We have to go to the Feedback tab to find this information. This tab is divided into 3 parts. The Collaboration part allows you to write comments visible only in the process editor. These comments will be visible to the various process analysts and editors who have access to this screen. It is a feature that allows teams to collaborate and coordinate in editing processes. There is the Comments and Suggestions part. It is in this part that you can find the comments that have been written from the portal. The process editor can then reply to this comment. We will now click on this icon to post this comment. From then on, this comment will be visible in the process documentation published in the portal. Mary Davies will then be able to see that comment. We will log in with Mary Davies' account to verify this. As you can see, Bill Evans' answer is displayed. We can come back to the Bill Evans account. You can archive comments. This aims to remove them from the documentation published in the portal. This feature can be useful to remove comments that have been processed. These comments will then be placed in the Archived Comments section and will no longer be visible to other users in the portal. This part is empty for the moment, because no comments regarding this process have been archived. To archive a comment, just click on this arrow and click on Archive Comment. As you can see, the comment and its reply are now in the Archived Comments section. This means that they are no longer visible in the portal. We can go check that out. Indeed, there are no more visible comments in the documentation of this process. Let's go back to the process editor. If you want to restore a comment, and therefore make it visible again on the portal, then you must click on this arrow and click on Unarchive Comment. From then on, comments will be visible again in the portal. We can use Mary Davies' comment to improve our process. I will then start adding elements. As you can see, no action is possible at the moment. For example, I can go to this task, double-click on it, but I cannot change the name of it. The same thing happens if I go to the properties of this task, I cannot change its name. Besides that, I can't delete an item. I get an error message when I try to do this. There is a message at the top left of the editor telling us that no action is possible because the process has been published. HEFLO does not allow the modification of a process that is published on the documentation or automation part. The objective is to guarantee portal users access to documentation that is not likely to change during consultation. There are then two possibilities to make changes. In both cases you must go to the Actions tab. The first possibility corresponds to the following scenario: you want to correct a modeling error or make a minor improvement that does not require keeping a history. In this case, you will click on Suspend Portal. From then on, the process documentation is no longer available on the portal. The message at the top left of the editor has also disappeared, and you can now make the necessary changes. We can go to the portal to verify that the documentation is no longer available. Indeed, the purchase of material goods and services process is not in the list of published processes. Let's go back to the process editor. We will publish the documentation of the process before presenting the second possibility. The publication is awaiting validation. We'll skip the validation step in the video, as we've covered this topic before. Mary has validated the publication of the documentation of this process, and as you can see, it is now no longer possible to make changes. The second possibility corresponds to the following scenario: you want to make improvements and changes to your process while keeping the history of what has already been modeled and published. In this case, you will have to create a new process version. To create a new version of the process, you must click on Create New Version. From then on, HEFLO will create a new version of this process. As you can see, the top left message has disappeared. So you can make changes. You can see in the Actions tab some interesting information. HEFLO tells you that it is the version 1 of the documentation that is published in the portal. There is always only one version of a process that is published in the documentation portal or in the automation part. We are currently on version 2. This is an editable version. Until we have completed the modifications to this new version, and we published it, the documentation for version 1 remains available for consultation in the portal for other users. This was not the case with our first method. Indeed, when we clicked on Suspend Portal, no documentation of this process was then available. If you go to Process Properties, then you can see that you are on version number 2. There are two methods to change versions. You can click on this arrow to get the list of existing versions. Or you can click the left arrow to go to the previous version, and the right arrow to go to the next version. We are now on version 1. You can see the message on the top left that says we cannot make changes. If we go to version 2, then the message is no longer visible and we can edit the process. We are now going to present in more detail the different options available in the Life Cycle part of the Actions tab. The Clone option allows you to create a new process with all the information of the process you are currently on. Unlike versions, no link will be kept between the new process and the original process. This is a useful feature if you want to create a process that has similarities to an existing process. We just saw the Create New Version option. We will see the Compare feature later in this video. The Archive feature allows this process to no longer be available in the process editor. This follows the same logic as what we saw for categories. The goal is not to permanently delete the process but to make it unavailable. You can find archived processes in the list of processes, as seen in the previous lesson. You can then restore an archived process by editing it and clicking Restore in the Actions tab. The Validate option will be presented in the automation training. There is the Remove option. This feature allows you to permanently delete the process or only the version you are on. I ask for your attention. Once deleted, the process or process version will no longer be available in your environment, and you will not be able to recover it. I will make an example. I will create a third version of this process. I am now on the third version, but I do not want to keep it. I want to delete it permanently. We go to the Actions tab and then we will click on Remove. There are then two options available. We can delete the process, and therefore all of its versions. Or we can delete only the version we are currently on. In our case, we are going to delete the current version. For security reasons, HEFLO asks to confirm the deletion. You must write the message entered in the dialog box and click on Yes to validate the deletion request. This type of confirmation exists in HEFLO for the deletion of other elements deemed important. I will now see the different versions that exist for my process. We now only have versions 1 and 2. The third version has been successfully removed. We are now on our second version. We're going to improve the process by following Mary Davies' recommendations, and making some other changes as well. We have finished updating the process. There is a feature in the Actions tab that lets you compare two process versions, or two processes. We will click on Actions and click on Compare. We are then redirected to another screen. This is divided into two parts. HEFLO automatically displays on the right the diagram of the version of the process we are on, and on the left its previous version. The objective is to be able to compare the two versions and see the evolution. We can modify the dimensions of the diagrams. We can then see in green the elements that have been added to the newer version, in orange the elements that have been modified, and in red the elements that have been removed. You also have the possibility to do this comparison with the different processes that exist in your environment, but in general we use this functionality to compare versions of the same process. Now that we have finished making changes to this second version, we will then be able to publish the documentation for this new version. The objective of this publication will be to replace the version 1 available in the portal with that of version 2 which is up to date. We will then click on Publish Documentation. The owner of the process, which in our case is Mary Davies, must validate this publication, and therefore the version changes in the portal. Waiting this validation, version 2 of the process is no longer modifiable, as indicated by the message at the top left of the process editor. We're going to log into Mary Davies' account. Mary has once again received an email and a notification informing her that a documentation publication is awaiting for her validation. We are going to click on View. We can then see two lines for the Purchase of Material Goods and Services process. This is version 1 which is published, and version 2 which is pending publication. When the process owner validates the publication of version 2, version 1 will no longer be available on the portal. I remind you that only one process version can be published for documentation or automation. We will then click on the version of the process that is awaiting validation. We find all the information of the process, as we have seen previously. As you can see, comments are still available. They are related to the process and not to a specific version. The comment archiving feature will allow you to leave only the comments you want. We will validate the publication of the second version of this process. There is now only one version of this process available on the portal. You can find up-to-date documentation for this process by clicking on its title or any related item. As we have seen previously, we can see the version number of the released process. Now back to the list of published processes. This is a default list with key information. We will see in the next video how to replace this list with a custom portal using the process landscape type process. Goodbye and see you next lesson.